Good afternoon, everybody. Can you hear me loud and clear? Okay, so what are we all doing here? What is it that you want from this session? What is it that you want from this conference? You want to go away and think, I've got the master plan on how to do things better and to make sure that we don't fall into the listeriosis trap. Okay, but it's not going to happen. It's not that simple, unfortunately. Okay, and that is exactly why the focus that I have is on that of employee engagement. We've heard a lot about culture and behavior and things like that, but in essence, if you look in the workplace, the engaged employee is the one, and the research is profound on that, is the one that will go the extra mile. And I think that is what we miss a lot in most of the industries. It's not only linked to the food industry. Okay, so, I mean, just simply if we look at why all of this is happening, you know, if we look at the 20th century and the 21st century changes, the 20th century was earmarked by a male-dominant environment, and it is being referred to as the more analytical thinking, numbers, your performance standards and compliance and so forth. And then with the 21st century, we saw a more human aspect again entering the world of work, and it goes hand in hand with, I think, females entering the world of work with the softer side of things. Well, that is what the general belief is, you know, the awareness, the transcendence, the community with others. So, you know, the 20th century, we have all these practices, and we still have a lot of them. I mean, the strat plans. I mean, we're all part of strategic planning, performance management, performance reviews, total quality management. But then the changes in the business sector, really with women entering the human part. And that is where we miss a lot of the commitment that people need to safety and to buy into reasons why it is important. And so just a bit of background on that. So then it comes to, okay, we talk about human, we talk about engagement. But how do we get the people to become engaged? I mean, there's still so much misunderstanding and so much confusion. And if you just look at the slide there, it says it all. You know, through engagement, it was a buzzword in the 90s. And again, it is still not sorted out. I mean, people are supposed to be happier when they engage. But what is that engagement? That's the difference. You know, so from a more humanist perspective, it is something that lies very close to what we all experience in the workplace. I mean, simple concepts like, what am I doing here? What is the purpose of my job? Those kinds of things, and that is exactly then what the engagement focuses on. Now, I was fortunate to come across the work of Sterling Crew specifically for the food safety culture. And he actually drew up, and I'll provide Linda with that document, a food safety culture continuum, where he already did the research. You know, and that is what I sometimes find people try and reinvent the wheel all the time. The research is done. This guy already drew up the continuum. He tells us that these are the aspects that's missing from a good food safety culture. So why not focus on those? And but I can elaborate on a lot of these things, but this is where I come in. That was what I was tasked to look at. And fortunately for me, it lands on the poor side of the continuum. So at least it gives me a bit of research backing to say, but this is the reason why I'm here. Okay, so so what is this thing we call employee engagement? And believe me, you can Google employee engagement. You will find so many theories and ideas and whatever it is that people have to say about employee engagement. So in essence, it really isn't an easy concept to define. It's typically like personality. Where's the 10 pointers of a personality? You won't find that because of the human aspect. So the research results, however, in this search for employee engagement and the numerous ways that they refer to it, and in psychology especially, there's in industrial psychology a lot of research. In essence, it comes down, and the results are profound, that when we have employee engagement, in whichever way you define it, and we'll look at some of those aspects, your employee will be healthier, they will be happier, they will be more creative, and they will be more productive. So, you know, it's not something that organizations should embark on as a once-off measure. You know, it's easy to say, we're doing a climate survey, we're doing an organization culture survey. How many times do we find that? You know, and then we don't even know why it was done and what the outcome will be of the survey that was done. So it's a constant thought, and that is what grabs or what distinguishes employee engagement from just normal behavioral practice. The fact that it's a constant thought, something that I am constantly engaging with on a daily basis because I want to. Okay, and I think that is quite important, the want to. So, I mean, if we look at the measures that's out there, we tend to measure, or we tend to think people are engaged and happy and committed when they experience job satisfaction, when they experience job happiness. But in the end, what does the performance tell us? You know, I can be satisfied with my job. It doesn't necessarily mean I'm going to perform. And that is, you know, I can be happy having the job because I've got an income. Doesn't mean I'm going to perform. You know, so there's a lot of jargon that's involved in the behavioral sciences, unfortunately. And I know a lot of people think, oh, we've heard this before, and that's the other word. And those in psychology and industrial psychology will know exactly what I'm talking about. So what it boils down to is that if employee engagement is the right concept in your organization, it is going to be something that evokes energy. Something that will energize your people to do the right thing on a continuous basis. It will lead to more creative practices because people will have the freedom of thought and the freedom of opinion without feeling that they're going to be ostracized or victimized or scared that something is going to happen to them. And they will also be enabled to be more productive because of their engagement in the processes. So in essence, and I think just to clarify the environment for us, a typical working definition of employee engagement, and this is what I strongly support, especially when it comes to the execution of employee engagement in the workplace, is that of when a person feels personally committed to do the right thing when nobody is watching, and somebody else mentioned that as well, even when it is not the fastest or the cheapest route. You know, and I think that personal commitment, and the Emma Bridger relates to that, and she says the extent to which people are personally involved in the success of a business. Now ask yourself, the person in the production line or the person on the ground floor, what personal involvement does that person experience? Apart from just checking whether this is the right, you know, whether this is now the right food stuff, or whether, you know, just the actual manufacturing of it. You know, what are those things that they ask about? What is the level of personal involvement? And engagement, in essence, is defined by three things. So it's a constant thought process. So it's the thinking. There's definitely an affective component, you know, the emotion that goes with it. And because of that, I act accordingly. That's basic human behavior. You know, so it's just from a different angle then. So, and the big question is, having had all this employee engagement components, why then do they so often fail? You know, we've got interventions and team building and bosberade and ligotlas and whatever you want to call it. But somehow you evoke the energy and it still fails because it's momentous. It doesn't become a thinking process, that continuous thought that I carry with me on a daily basis. So, but the indication is very clear, and Ryk also referred to that, is that the two biggest reasons why employee engagement interventions tend to fail is because of flaws in the organization culture. You know, the culture, and that is what the essence of this conference is. And then the fact that most of the recommendations focus on the leaders. What can leaders do to create more engagement? Why don't we ask our workers, how would you like to become more engaged? You know, and that is the difference. And it's just a perceptual shift that needs to take place. So the most part, or the part that's most missing, is the informal building blocks of culture. People refer to DNA previously. What's the DNA of our company? You know, and I'm actually glad they did, because if you go look at the essence of an organization culture, it consists of two dominant areas. And, you know, it's your visible concrete tools, the DNA, but you have the formal building blocks, which resides in all your controls and measures that you have for your industry, the structure of your organization, everything, performance metrics, all those managerial stuff. And then the informal building blocks, and those are the ones that we more often than not ignore when it comes to engagement. I mean, you want people to be engaged in compliance and rules and regulation, but what about their buy-in, the mindset, the thought process, the networking that we have within our organization? Okay, so are you still awake? This is the graveyard session, we know that. Okay, are we all there? Okay, so the main thing is that your greatest influence on engagement in your organization will be the informal building blocks. You can have anything in place, beautiful on paper, but if your informal DNA is warped, it's not going to be supportive. And the commitment, level of commitment will not be what you want it to be. Okay, so what I've done with all this information, and remember, the food industry is not my industry at all, but the people industry is. And I think that gives me quite a good link to any industry. So I've sort of designed a model for increased employee engagement. Okay, now if you look at typically where we start, the organization culture, I've spoken about the formal, the informal. Okay, and then in the middle, you have engagement and commitment. Those are unfortunately two things that run hand in hand. And they are supportive of one another, and they are embedded in culture. Okay, but the big difference, and maybe on a theoretical basis, is that employee engagement is intrinsic to the job, and that's quite an important component, whereas your commitment is extrinsic to the organization. I'm committed to CUT. It's my company that I work for. But how engaged am I in my job? Will I work after hours because my job is not done yet? See, that is where the confusion often sets in, and that is why I've included both of them in this model, because both is vested within the culture of the organization as well. So, where does this lead to? There's one component in industrial psychology, organization behavior, and I also did research on this, and I designed a questionnaire, and I got feedback, and I did all the necessary analyses and so forth. The one common thing that's emerging that I think a lot of companies can actually benefit from is the notion of workplace spirituality. Now, don't put on a religiosity cap or don't even think of religion. Okay, workplace spirituality. Who of you have never, or who of you have heard of the notion of workplace spirituality? I should have done a whole different presentation. Okay, so, and my research was one of the first workplace spirituality research on a doctoral level that was done in South Africa, and with empirical evidence. And the whole design of the tool was an employee engagement measure to see at what level are people engaged, but in line with commitment. And, you know, results of that research was so interesting because in most cases, engagement measured high, but the commitment was low. You know, especially with millennials, continuous commitment. They don't care for a 20-year tenure. They want to go where the money is. So what are your company doing to make sure that that person stays engaged? You spend a lot of money on training and development. So where's the retention in that? And that is where the engagement becomes such an important component. So that is the component that I want to focus your attention on as one of the how-tos to ensure greater employee engagement in your organization. So workplace spirituality is regarded by many as the missing link in organization behavior and in businesses for increased engagement and loyalty and commitment and buy-in and all these human things, the informal building blocks that we actually want in our organization. So this is my definition that I actually, from all the literature that I've engaged in, I formulated it in a very simplistic manner because of the people side of things that are so important. And it's a process in which individuals express personal values. Again, the personal, the individual, within the organization context. Why? Because in the search of greater meaning, sense of meaning, purpose, and connectedness and community with others, we've become removed from our communities. We've become removed from where we used to find spirituality. I am because of others. It's gone into the workplace, technology, fourth industrial revolution. All the pointers are there. Okay, so the main thing then of workplace spirituality is that it is a psychological state that people actually have within the workplace. And that is the part of being engaged. And then it also entails a stable attachment. And there comes the commitment. So if you see what I'm getting at is that workplace spirituality is a component that enhances engagement and commitment within the workplace. So now you can ask me, okay, so how do I get there? You know, do I need to build do I need to erect a cross somewhere, or do I need, because we are thinking spirituality really, but it's not at all in that sense. Okay, so typically, and I'm not going to bore you with a lot of facts, but the spiritual organization, and think back on that slide of crew that I showed you on the continuum, it unleashes creativity. Okay, and the literature clearly indicates that engaged people are more creative. Fosters a climate of trust, loyalty, openness. One of the previous speakers had that as part of their practice in the organization. Appreciation for others, views, inputs, the way that we engage on a daily basis. Inclusiveness, cultural diversity. So this is typically, you know, and what I like is the opportunity to metamorphose employees into a community. Okay, so that you change people from I'm doing this job for my own sake and my pocket into we are doing this for the good of our customers and the good of our organization. And definitely reduces absenteeism, enhances job satisfaction and personal satisfaction. Now, what do we do with our performance management systems? Why are they there? at this stage, I think first and foremost to see that people comply. You know, so where do we get to the personal satisfaction that people actually gain from the workplace? So what is the influence then of this component we call workplace spirituality on the business? Now, I mean, most businesses already have spiritual values in place. Employee assistance programs, wellness programs, those are all supportive of greater sense of meaning and well-being and purpose. So growth and development, so those values are not new things that a company needs to go and design. Okay, it's already there. And because those spiritual values are clearly communicated and instilled in the culture of your organization, it's just a matter of positioning it correctly in your organization. It will lead to repeated acts of doing the right thing. You know, it's a typical Pavlov's dog situation. Okay, Pavlov actually thought we were lower order animals, where Thorndike came and said, sorry, you know what, we have a choice. We do choose. So given that in mind, punishment and reward, I mean, we know that if we create spiritual values in our governing system in the organization, each and every employee is going to know but what is right and what is wrong. And because of that, and because of the support of the collective support of the values, and that is the community of practice that Ryk also referred to, it leads to repeated acts. In events, leads to good moral habits, the virtue, it becomes the norm of your organization, and it builds character, the image of your organization, the character that you want out there. And in the end, the workplace benefits will outweigh that of not investing in cultivating a workplace spirituality in your organization. Okay, and the implication of this, and what's the way forward? Okay, so the implication is, and coming from the workplace spiritual research that I've done, the engaged companies, okay, through the component of understanding this meaning and purpose that we're talking about, the Ubuntu principle, the engaged companies do better. It is, the research is out there, especially in Australia and America, where workplace spirituality has escalated tremendously over between the 1990s and 2010. That was the big growth of the notion of workplace spirituality. And their research definitely indicates that they do better, it impacts behavior, and it leads to better practice eventually, creating the norm, the value, which is vested in your culture. So, faceless surveys. Okay, and when I mentioned this, there was a bit of a thing that, but surveys is what we do. This is how we determine how happy our people are. But it kills engagement. You must realize that, because it's a point in time perception and feeling. And I told Ryk and Linda last night, you're going to get a different score on engagement the first week of the month as opposed to the last week of the month. Because my purse is getting emptier towards the end of the month. It's a thinking and feeling component. So what do we want to achieve with these endless surveys that are done? Yes, it has its place, by all means, and it has to be part of a holistic process, but it shouldn't be the only measure that you use to determine how, to what level are my people engaged and committed in my organization. Okay, and what it boils down to is that, and yes, another thing I want to say about the faceless surveys, and those of you who are in a relationship, I mean, how's it going to make you feel about the relationship with your husband, wife, or significant other if you've got to fill in the extent of your engagement to this and commitment to this person through a survey once a year? But that's what we do in our organizations. We want to establish a relationship, but we measure it once a year without asking. Okay, so it has to be relationship driven. It's not survey-driven. There has to be more than that. So yes, sorry, there's no quick fix to this. And there's a very interesting study, and because I said workplace spirituality, the 3 defining components or characteristics are that of sense of meaning, purpose, and transcendence, or community with others. Mitrov did quite an interesting study on the question of what gives people meaning in their work. And he sort of came up with the 4 dominant aspects were indicated as the ability to realize my full potential as a person. So Maslow, you were not far wrong. You know, it's still there. And this study was done in 2014. Okay. Being associated with a good or ethical organization. We all talk about ethics, doing the right thing for the majority or the greater good of the majority of the people. But it still comes out top. Personal, ethical. Those are the human factors in your organization. Interesting work measured 3rd, and making money was last. But doing this with the millennials might just give us a total different picture. But at this stage, this is what there is. So the 2 important components then, the human factor and the ethics. And those are the things that you can instill through the practice of workplace spirituality. Okay, so what then? Okay, what's forward from here? Well, survey has its place, I said that. Leaders, yes, they do set the scene. They influence through actions and words. A strong culture is necessary. You have to make the right decision at the right time, every day, at every level. And the increased engagement is something that we need. You know, the relationship is the part that we need profoundly. So, different ideas, some ideas. How? Okay, you've spoken about this aspect, but you know, some of these practices are out there, and it was mentioned from RCL's side as well. The hotline, the suggestion boxes. There are things that can be done that is very simple and doesn't cost a lot of money. Because people want to feel they belong to something and they have a purpose in their organization. You know, if you go and in our university and you ask the cleaner, so what are you doing here? They're not going to say, I'm educating people, like with the JFK situation. They're going to say, I clean the floors. And, you know, actually they must feel that I am part of the education of people in this organization, because that is what they are. So there are many suggestions, group conversations, you know, regular question and answer sessions, and then you tell me, but you know what, we've got a production deadline to meet. We don't have time for this. You'll have to make time for this, okay, unfortunately. Suggestion boxes, it's anonymous. Okay, it works very well because you ask the person, you tell them your opinion is important to us. What is working and what is not working? If you identify not working, give us a suggestion on how to improve. It spurs creativity. It spurs a buy-in to the organization. One-on-one conversations, the listening, okay, and that's textbook, old psychology 101, developmental psychology and behavior. So community events, okay, we have that. That's very much embedded in our health and wellness programs, you know, HIV testing and things like that. So many of these things are already in place. So you don't have to reinvent the wheel. You don't have to come up with a total novel way of getting your people to be more engaged in the workplace. Every meeting, 10 minutes before the meeting, or just have a culture of, here's the agenda, which everybody usually receives in advance or should. What are we missing? What would you like us to discuss that's not yet discussed? It's a simple question, you know, and you have to create that environment where people feel comfortable to voice. Okay, and not just fear of not complying. Okay, and also workplace spirituality leadership capacity building. That's also a new field. And the nice part of doing research and having students is that you can actually choose topics for them if they don't have any. So I'm venturing into developing a workplace spiritual leadership model or program. You know, so that because workplace spirituality has become so dominant and so it's sort of taking over the whole idea of organization, behavior, and commitment, that one needs to explore and expand on that. So who is this spiritual leader? I mean, in simple terms, it's the one that values employee engagement emanating from employee happiness. Okay, are your employees happy? Those working on the entry level in the organization, are they happy? You know, and yes, it's the people practice, and we're not going to steer away from that if we want to create a culture where everybody buys into good food safety culture, you know, or good food safety practices. So this is just this was a model that I've just also developed in the sense of showing where do we place workplace spirituality then within the bigger picture. Sorry, it's a bit small, but here we have all the influencing factors. We talk about change all the time. The fourth industrial revolution, the knowledge economy, okay, and then the role of spirituality in the middle. Two important things that emanate from this: individual experiences of workplace spirituality. That influences directly engagement and commitment. And then from there, you get communities of practice. And that's eventually where you want to be, where everybody collectively supports the whole idea of food safety, because we collectively share the values. Okay. So the ultimate outcome then for food safety practices is that food safety practice should become the norm, okay, and a source of personal pride, because that is what you want to instill, where pride is a personal commitment, it's an attitude, and it separates excellence from mediocrity. Okay, and that is what I would like to leave you with. I mean, are you going to stay mediocre, or are you going to venture into the pride of excellence? Okay, thank you so much.